wonderful friend Sarah up there in North Canada. She's going to introduce and use the Canadian speak to introduce me and Mena and Merve, my assistants in all of this. So I'll stop talking for a few minutes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Bonk, and thank you everybody for joining us. Hello and good day. Great to see that we have participants from all over the world today. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. On behalf of Contact North, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the webinar, How to Motivate and Retain Online Learners. My name is Sarah Govro, and I'm a research associate at Contact North, and I'll be moderating this session today. Just a few items before we start. The chat is open. Just remember to select panelists and attendees on the pull-down menu. But if you do have any questions for Dr. Bonk, please enter them in the Q&A tool. You'll find that at the bottom of your screen. We have a current doctoral advisee of Dr. Bonk's, Merve Bastogan, with us, as well as a former advisee, Dr. Mena Zhu of Wayne State University, to help us with the Q&A. And Dr. Bonk will stay after the presentation, if necessary, to answer the rest of your questions, tell jokes, and perform a few magic tricks. As you're aware, the speaker today is Dr. Curtis Bonk, Professor of Instructional Systems Technology at Indiana University. He is trained in educational psychology and accounting at the University of Wisconsin. Kurt has assured me that he is no longer a boring accountant. Dr. Bonk will speak on motivating and retaining online learners. He has a free book, Adding Some Tech Variety, 100+ activities for motivating and retaining learners online, that you can download in English and Chinese. I will put that link in the chat momentarily. Kurt is a big fan of Canada and has many connections here. In the fall of 1998, he spent part of his sabbatical at Simon Fraser University out in Burnaby, BC, where he originally learned to speak Canadian, and also met Contact North Research Associate Dr. Ron Austin, the former Dean of Education at York University in Toronto. Coincidentally, Dr. Bonk is now a Research Associate with Contact North. Kurt is currently in the midst of a lucky streak in disseminating his research, as he happily met his ambitious goal of 20 publications in 2020 and has 8 more peer-reviewed journal articles ready in press for 2021. You can go to publicationshare.com to find and download many of these, and trainingshare.com for the slides to this and other talks. So welcome, Kurt, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'll repeat that TrainingShare has my slides. If they're not up yet, they will be soon, and you can download them. They have slides for various of my talks. I want to thank Mena Zhu and Merve Bastogan for coming in again and helping out. I presented last time, or for the first time, I guess, on this topic on June 29th. On that day, it was my 100th day of running in a row. And I'm now hit 363, 2 more days to 1 year, and I guess 137 to 500, which is my goal. I did, as I said, I brought extra ties for those of you who are trying to move out of Canada. I have a red, white, and blue tie. I've got one on. I can send this to anyone who needs it. I brought my St. Patrick's Day hats, as you saw earlier from yesterday's parties that we didn't have many parties here. Let's see what else. As if you joined us back on June 29th, you will realize I have not cut my hair since that last show on June 29th. I haven't cut it in over a year, but I will on April Fool's Day, maybe. So welcome in. Thank you, Sarah, for the wonderful introduction. I'm happy. I believe in the power of sharing, so I'm happy to share anything that I mention in this talk, any of my articles that I bring up and talk about, that book. Like Sarah mentioned, I'll be going through, basically walking through, so you can download this for free right now at techvariety.com. If you're Chinese in Chinese, or if you're Canadian or from the US in English, hopefully other parts of the world. Again, I'll walk through that. There's a second book. I'm going to give a bonus. I have a second book called Empowering Online Learning that I'm going to walk through as well. Unfortunately, that one is not free. And that looks like so. It's called my R2D2 book. And so I brought my lightsaber with me from Star Wars to go through that one in the second half, or really at the end, the last 10 minutes of this particular talk. So let's see, let me try and share those slides with you. And I hope I don't have a black line down the screen. Those of you who came a little bit early, and Sarah, we don't have any black lines, right? Going down the screens?
There's a small one at the top, but it's okay. Just keep going.
Okay. Sometimes that happens when I share my a small one. I'm a little worried now.
It's gone now. You're good.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah. So as I started with this little song, what the world needs now is love, is something that you can all start in your face-to-face classes, your blended or your fully online classes, as a welcoming technique. Welcome your students into the class, whether it's an online or face-to-face or video conference or Zoom or whatever it is. People come to your classes with a lot of social emotional baggage, a lot of things that are affecting them in their daily lives. And so if you can start with something a little bit different to bring them out of that, or to welcome them into your class, it's a way to create a learning environment that's welcoming and supportive. In today's day and age, with all the things that are happening around the world, and economically, financially, socially, politically, and personally, we need opportunities to escape some of that. And in order to learn, as Maslow said, we have to satisfy our lower psychological needs before we can address the higher order ones. And so this is something that I use because it's not only that, it's fun. Virtual choir is something one of my students now is, I think, going to study for his dissertation. There are a lot of people who are creating these virtual choirs around the world, whether in Singapore or here in Indiana or at Berkeley School of Music or wherever. So we've gone through all these warm-up questions, and now we're back to the main event: how to motivate and retain learners online. On the left, my tech variety book. On the right, my R2D2 model: read, reflect, display, and do. These are frameworks. These are models. These are ways to think about all the possibilities for teaching and learning online. You see, the specifics that we go through, technologies that Merve and Mena pass on to me and say, Dr. you really need to think about using these in your talk. Those come and go. You'll be writing these things down. You're taking copious, some of you will take copious notes in all of this. Oh, what was that Trello? I gotta write that Padlet, I gotta write that. Well, those tools are fine, you need to use them now, but it's not what's gonna exist in 10 years. The frameworks, the models, the schemes that you create or utilize from other people will stay with you for a longer period of time. And so we'll be in and out talking about motivation and motivational techniques in this talk. Yes, we're all a little bit tired and have Zoom fatigue, but teaching remotely, teaching in an online synchronous way. Well, synchronous has existed for over 30 years. And I wrote an article for Distance Ed called Pandemic Ponderings, 30 Years to Today: Synchronous Signals, Saviors, and Survivors, talking about what Zoom is causing the whole world to reflect on their teaching and revisit their teaching approaches. These remote teaching episodes that we're in today because of the pandemic, because of COVID, are not anything new. You know, people have been studying remotely the polio epidemic and during the Spanish flu 100 years ago, teaching via radio or television or correspondence. As was pointed out in October 5th, 2020 article in The Conversation by Catherine Foss, is nothing new. And if you download the slides, you can get the links, you can click and read this article. You're looking at somebody who's a product of TV and correspondence courses. I took courses from the University of Wisconsin. U-rah-rah, Wisconsin. Ah, Wisconsin. Oh. Anyhow, break out through that line. And you know, I had a privilege of learning from Dr. Bob Clausen remotely from Milwaukee in a little cube farm. I was working in the 1980s and escaped the cube farm and went to Wisconsin, and he hired me to create a telecourse called Teachers Tackle Thinking, Critical Thinking in the Classroom, that was nationally syndicated. And I got the buzz. I got hooked on distance learning and online learning and all sorts of things. You know, the Plato system at the University of Illinois was something that, you know, was amazing. It created, you know, hypermedia and chat rooms and online discussion boards and touch screens, you know, like, you know, social communities, databases, all sorts of things were created at the University of Illinois. Even though I'm from Wisconsin, I live in Indiana, I could care less about anything that happens in Illinois. A lot of good things have happened in Illinois, like supercomputers and the Plato system and all sorts of things we utilize today, all started back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s with that system. And Plato still exists. And so we've come a long way. I mean, you know, I can show you I learned from, you know, the little tapes, and this is all my dissertation data is on a zip disk, and I remember punch cards. I'm sure some of you do too, and you're certifiably old. You know, but today's kids need to be motivated. They need to be motivated because they're digital students. They work as well in the physical world and the digital world. You know, but we don't need to put boxes on one's head. We hopefully don't have to worry about parents climbing the building and handing the answers off to their students in the classrooms. Hopefully we can find ways to engage students so that they want to learn, so that they want to come to school, so that they're engaged in their own learning, they're participating, they're contributing in interactive, engaging learning environments. So if there's a theme today, it's about creating effective learning environments, whether you are a concierge or you consider yourself a curator, like a museum curator finding the golden nuggets, or you call yourself an orchestra conductor, or a counselor or a consultant. There's all sorts of metaphors that we can take on as instructors today that can make us a more effective teacher. And I've got 20 of them I'm working on in my next book. We have an assembly of roles that we take on as instructors, be it blended learning instructors, fully online or face-to-face. And once we recognize that direct instruction is not the only way to teach, I look at myself being on a camping trip and being a camping trip guide or an expedition leader in my classes, showing them lovely vistas and places we can visit and read about them. But we also have to think about our principles of instruction, what I'm calling the last principles, the learning activation system template. We want to create motivational and inspiring places to learn, where it's meaningful, where the learning is flexible. We have choice, we have options, we have connectedness to other human beings. We have a sense of autonomy and support and feedback within a system that challenges us to learn. When we start thinking about our role and we think about the principles of our environments, we can start to transform or shift our learning a bit. What did Jean-Luc Picard say?
Engage. Engage.
On the count of three, everybody with me. 1, 2, 3. Engage.
Engage.
Well, Jerry Brophy believed in engagement. He was a Michigan State professor, but he believed in much more than that. We had to have a sense of goal setting in our environments, challenge, support, fun, enthusiasm, feedback. All these things make for a motivational learning environment and effective climate. Well, I've repurposed those, and I've repurposed Edward Deasy and Richard Ryan's ideas in terms of volition and intrinsic motivation. And I've put them together into what I'm calling the tech variety model. And again, you can go to that link and download the entire book. Again, there's Chinese as well as in English. We sort out in the 100 activities in the book, and by the way, I co-authored this with Elaine Coe from the University of Waikato in New Zealand. Thank you, Elaine. And wonderful to work with her because she had the theory nailed down. And when I saw her present, I said, you can handle the theory, I'll write the activities. And so we worked on this book for a while. It came out a couple of years back. It's had a couple hundred, probably 300,000 downloads by now, in fact. We sort things out from the degree of time, risk, and cost. Some people want low risk, low cost, low time activities because they haven't done much in the area of online and blended learning. Other people are experimenters. They're constantly tweaking or having new ideas. They might try some of the things that are higher risk, higher time, that are, exercise the risk muscle a bit. Some are more instructor focused, some are more student focused. Those are all listed in there in the book. We have 10 principles of motivation, 10 activities per chapter, 100 activities. There's a variation for each activity. So there's really 200 ideas in the book. We have chapter 14 near the end of the book on how to help resistant, reluctant, reticent instructors, how to support those who don't want to do it or don't believe they can do it. So some examples of tech variety. And again, these are examples that may not be relevant in 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years. The technology might leave. Every time I do a talk on tech variety, I include new examples. In this talk, I have 24 examples that I didn't have in my June 29th talk, okay? So things change that quickly. The technology changes, people share things with me, we tinker, we try things out, but the framework hasn't changed. The tech variety model or framework, the R2D2 model, doesn't change. I could tweak it. There are critiques about the model because there's one thing about purpose, for instance, is not apparent in the model. There are some things about motivation that you might critique it in some ways, but I think it's fairly comprehensive. The first one Abraham Maslow talked about, tone and climate. Carl Rogers talked about, the humanists talk about creating a safe tone or climate. Now I showed a video with a virtual choir. I could have shown the one on the right of Singapore's people around the world from Singapore singing a famous song that they all love, or the Indiana, I could have Merve and Mena singing a song from Indiana, but of course they told me they don't know the words. They still got their dissertations passed. Well, Merve hasn't yet. Maybe I'll make her memorize that song before she defends. Anyways, trying to create a safe harbor or climate in your class. One way to do this in Zoom is to utilize the breakout rooms. Now, Plymouth State University in New Hampshire, where I visited about 8 to 10 years ago, they had a session on all the ways to learn to utilize Zoom in an effective, engaging way. And so if you click on the link there, you would get dozens of ideas for using Zoom. One of their ideas was to have introductions in the breakout rooms, listing expectations in the breakout rooms, sharing a link in the breakout rooms, sharing what you worked on in the past week in the breakout rooms. So dividing people up into small 4, 5, 6 people breakout rooms, and then doing a small one-off activity and coming back to the main group and sharing with each other. That'd be one way to create a safe tone, by talking to 1, 2, or 3 people, and then coming back to the entire class of 20, 30, or 40 people or more. That way you can get your ideas validated from your peers before you share them with the larger group, where you might be more shy or more introverted student. By having that chance to share in and amongst your small group, you might gain confidence. You could also then share the ideas of each other. So if you have a student who's kind of shy, their peer might say, hey, Mena had a really great idea. Even though she's not talking, let me share what she had to say. Another thing that you can do for creating a safe tone or climate is use Slido. Slido lets students vote on issues or questions, and then they can type into their mobile devices a set of, they can type in questions for a keynote speaker or a guest speaker that the class has, and then vote on the best questions, and those are the ones that get asked. Now, I saw this tool used in Singapore a few years ago, where they had the keynotes all talking, and they had the questions on the right-hand side getting voted on, and you didn't know whose question you were voting that you'd want to include or not include. So Slido's anonymous voting and ranking and sorting. There are other aspects to Slido as well, so it's worth checking out. It's a freemium tool, so there is a free version and a paid version of that. Flipgrid, built by my friend Charlie Miller at the University of Minnesota, where they talk funny up there, yeah, up like in Canada, where they, like about this and about that. Up in Minneapolis, where Charlie is, he built Flipgrid. And Flipgrid took off like, especially during COVID, like every 10 seconds, a new teacher is using Flipgrid. It's threaded video discussions of like a minute and a half. You have to present your ideas. And so I have my students, as you see on the left there and on the right, those are my students last spring, all introducing themselves or all discussing articles or whatever topic I give them. Instead of typing, you're talking. My fingers get sore, and Flipgrid's a good tool just to let me have a break from all the typing. I go, if you're like me, you're always, fingers want to fall off sometimes. But not only that, Microsoft bought Flipgrid and made it available free to the world. And so, if you're not thinking about using Flipgrid, you must be flipped out. And not only that, I could get you Charlie Miller to talk to your class if you really want to talk to the founder of the tool and get your students excited about Flipgrid. Well, maybe I could try at Charlie, at least an email introduction to Charlie. And I wrote a letter for him for tenure and full professor. He left. His tenure job. What a fool he is. Well, maybe not. Number 3 or number E, it's A, B, C, D, E. So number 5, I guess already. Instructor introductions. Just having a short video introduction of yourself enables your students to find out a little about who you are and what the course is about and feel a little safe harbor. But not only that, in today's day and age of Videopedia, not Wikipedia, your students can introduce themselves in video and you can find out about them as well. Again, it's a way to feel some connectedness with one another, especially in K-12 space, where kids might be more concerned about this newfangled online environment. You could also use polling like we did in here. We had polls, micro poll everywhere. You take and get students' responses to the poll, and the responses can automatically be in your PowerPoint slides and be sent remotely if you're doing video conference to everyone else. Pretty amazing free tool. And you can get the results and share them, blah, blah, blah. Another idea. And so here we're on encouragement, by the way. We're up to number 2, encouragement or feedback. Vocaro is a way to give voice feedback to your students. So your fingers might get tired. You might not like Flipgrid. Well, how about Vocaro? You don't want to see yourself in Flipgrid? Vocaro lets you have audio feedback to your students. And so it gets a link after you type, you speak the feedback on their paper or on their presentation, you get a link that you share with them. And it's free, free, free. Sarah said, if I said free 3 times today, I'd get good evaluations. There you go, Sarah. How's that? We're all done. Quizlet's another free tool, which is the largest testing system in the world. And not only that, it has some free templates, some sample quizzes and exams that other people created and made available for you to use or to change. Why not? Students like to self-test. They like to know if they know something. You might not even make them worth any points, just having them try them out before taking an exam as warm-up exams, as interactive flashcards, if you will, or how-to demonstrations in GoView or Jing or Screener or whatever. Now, Jing has a time limit in terms of the demonstration of the tutorial, but it's free up to so much, maybe 10 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever it is. And so you put on the headset, and you may walk your students through different sections of a software tool that you're teaching them, or a website that you're teaching them, or a testing instrument, whatever it is. You're creating a way for them to gain some confidence by seeing a demo, by seeing a how-to, in effect, in a video tutorial. Method number 3, or motivational technique number 3, is curiosity. And of the chapters in the Tech Variety book, the chapter on the curiosity is the most downloaded chapter in the book. Go figure. So whether it's a scientific discovery, like putting glasses on a cuttlefish, who would want to put glasses, but whatever. And so looking at depth perception, pretty intriguing stuff from the University of Minnesota and out there in Massachusetts, somewhere in Massachusetts. Did I say that right? Might have to bleep that swear word. I think I said, yeah. Well, anyways, Massachusetts. getting students excited about science, STEM, or get excited about fitness, watching a person who's 104 years old run a marathon, or the first woman to run the Boston Marathon 50 years ago, rerun it a couple of years ago. Fitness, training, health. We have a national or global crisis in terms of health. If you can embed and integrate in videos or demonstrations of, here's a centenarian setting the record, all-time record for running the 100-yard dash. How cool is that? You know, getting people excited about fitness. Like I said, I've had 363 days in a row of running. Yesterday, I wore my green hat for St. Patrick's Day out there. Another thing, if you teach photography, you might, show the world's oldest photograph with a human being in it from Paris in 1938. And as you can see, the woman was shining a man's shoes, or I think that's what was happening in that picture. Doesn't say. So multimedia news all over the BBC or CNN or MSNBC or whatever, or Fox News, whatever. Multimedia is in the news, not just text in the news. And so we can learn about, old time cameras from the Civil War era and so forth. And we can learn about a new discovery in India, in an Indian cave, Indian cave masterpieces, and get people excited about art or about anthropology or archaeology or whatever it is. Or you might show there's monoliths showing up all around the world, So intriguing people. So what are these crazy things? These monoliths showing up in the Utah deserts or in Europe or and so forth. So number 3 is all about intrigue and unknowns. And so you're providing them with, something in the news every day. In my discipline in psychology and educational technology, there's something in the news every day I can show. And if you teach paleontology, there's a new dinosaur discovered every week. The longest necked dinosaur, the Jar Jar Binks dinosaur, or the longest, the most massive titanosaur can't even fit in the Smithsonian, or the wading bird dinosaur. It's craziness. Number 4 gets us into variety, novelty, fun, and fantasy. And Merve likes to use Animaker. It's a cloud-based tool, do-it-yourself tool for video making. My students just did video making projects, and they used Animaker with props and transitions and background images and so forth. My students sometimes like to create these interactive quizzes, and Jeopardy types of quizzes, game show types of quizzes. And they might volunteer to do it so that I don't have to create it as the instructor. They're one time during the semester, every one of my students has to present or demonstrate or do something. I call it the cool resource provider. And everyone signs up for a week where they are a cool resource provider, and they might create a Jeopardy-like quiz and so forth. Like this one here, which was created by Merve, who's my assistant here. When she took my 511 class, she made an interactive quiz using Jeopardy Rocks, which is a free website. So you see that on there, R511 Merve. Take a look at her quiz, see if you can pass Merve's quiz. Another thing that you might go to is random.org. So if you don't happen to have a pair of dice in front of you to flip the dice and see if you want to start your agenda with item 6, you can go to random.org and let it decide using the list randomizer or the coin flip tool or the deck of playing cards or whatever. It's a wonderful little cool tool. So I use random.org when students do their final presentations. I list all the names and I have random.org decide who's going to be first, who's going to be second, who's going to be third. So students can't be mad at me. They have to be mad at the computer. Now, if they want to switch with someone else for a different time, they can. I don't make it, that's, hard and fast. Another kind of cool tool like this is called Wheel Decide. So if you're not sure where to start the agenda for the day, you might let the wheel decide. Again, I use the dice. I throw the dice. Oh, I'll start with number 6. I once taught a course in reverse, total reverse from the normal way. Instead of starting with week 1, I started from the last week. It was a 8-week course. I started week 8 and then week 7, week 6. We got to get out of that mindset of teaching the same way all the time, be structured and resistant to any changes at all, like robots or automatons out there. This tech variety model should break you out of being an automaton. Okay, Kahoot. Once met the founder of Kahoot. He's from Norway, comes from the fjords of Norway. It's kind of a cool guy, plays a lot of music. And Kahoot's been a really cool tool. It's kind of taken off. It's gotten a lot of funding recently. I think it might go public actually. But Kahoot's a free tool. And it lets you do interactive quizzes, fun quizzes. And my students, when they win, they want their picture in the face-to-face class. They want their picture under their score, to be able to present and share with their parents and their friends. It's a cool tool. You have everyone has a screen name or a fictional name if you want, and then you answer the questions as fast as you can, and you get points based on speed and accuracy. Another kind of neat tool is called Future Me, and I use Future Me, where I write a letter to myself at the beginning of the semester or the beginning of the year, and then that letter comes up at a certain date into my email basket. Like, did you accomplish what? Did you write your book this summer? Did you finish chapter 1? Did you meet your goal of 20 publications in 2020? Well, fortunately I did. FutureMe.org is a cool tool to have you goal set. Humans are goal-driven creatures, but humans also like choice and autonomy. And so one of the things I let my students do is say, and Mena did this, one of my assistants here, if you take a MOOC and you write a reflection paper on it, and that MOOC relates to this class, you can eliminate one of the midterm assignments. If you pass that MOOC and give me a certificate and give me a reflection on it, tell me what you learned, you can eliminate one of the finals. And so students love doing this assignment. In effect, I have them taking, think about it, I have them taking 2 courses instead of 1 course. I'm a sneaky guy, but Mena loves taking courses. She takes all sorts of MOOCs. She likes to learn, and many students do like to learn, And so there might be MOOCs on English your students are taking, or coding, or fitness. There's tons of things. If you go to Class Central, there's a list of MOOCs available. If you go to the MOOC list, or you go to Coursera or EDX, or all these places. I also let students go to biography.com and track the life of a scientist, or to go to womeninscience.com, or all sorts of biography websites out there to get them engaged in the real life of that person, or go to their Twitter feeds if they're still alive. Some of my students say to me, Dr. Bonk, your assignments are too easy. This 100-word glossary thing you're assigning, you're doing every semester, why do I want to type a 100-word glossary up? I want to make a multimedia glossary. I want to make it more challenging with videos and conferences and books. And many students, there are examples. If you download my slides, you can see the examples and look at them. I don't have time in this talk to show you them. It's fascinating. Students pushing themselves beyond expectations. That's the goal. The goal is not to teach a course. The goal is to let them self-determine their learning beyond the minimal expectations or goals of the class. It's always one's goal to see students who want to learn within your discipline. This model, this framework, Tech Variety, is geared to do just that. And now we're at the point where we have another polling question. Now I'm going to stop sharing because we're going to go to the polls, I think, in here. Let's see if we can get the polls. And any light bulbs going off so far? Yes, definitely. Pop, pop, pop. No, there's no hope with this idiot. My brain is not working today. And we now have 119. We've got more than half of the people who signed up or enrolled have shown up for this session, which I think, Sarah, is pretty good. What do you think, Sarah?
That's awesome. Yep.
What was the sign up on this one? 209?
219, and typically we get anywhere between half to about 70 that show up. So this is a good.
So
good
thank
show.
you all for showing up on this one. And we're now up to 120. So there we go. So let's share the results here. We got 87 so far, and looks like many of you are getting ideas out of this. So hurrah! Hopefully, yes. Hopefully soon. For the 4 people, hopefully soon. Good enough. Thank you for being honest and playing the game. All right, let's go up back to the sharing thing here. And I have to figure this out. And all right, do you see that, Sarah?
Yes, it's the black is slowly going away. I think just like last time, it will slowly go away. Next time you have a poll, you can let me know. I can launch it for you so you don't have to come out of your screen share.
Ah, thank you.
No problem.
But I may need to see the result. Okay, I'll have you try and launch it. Thank you. So we get into the second half of tech variety, which gets us into relevance. And this is something that I'm doing a lot this semester, guest expert chats. And the guy on the upper left there is named Mike Melinda, a famous person in educational technology space, several award-winning books. He created the course that I'm teaching. And so I bring him back every once in a while to talk about the class. And so my students find it really interesting to see what these classes was designed for 40 years back and what he thinks about it could be in 10 years from now, predicting the future. I bring back one of my former students coming from Bangkok, Thailand. And I bring, my colleagues from Stanford and all over the world. There's that in the left-hand side, in the middle, second from the left is Charlie Miller, who developed Flipgrid. I brought him in to talk about Flipgrid. I brought in Dr. Marty Siegel to talk about the Plato system at the University of Illinois, which I showed earlier. He was a faculty member at Indiana until this past summer when he retired. So he talked about the history of the Plato system. It's always interesting to get someone else's perspective into your class to make the course more meaningful to your students so they can learn about the people they're reading about. They can see the real person. There's people behind the article. There's people behind the books that you're using. And they struggle with publishing that book. It didn't come easy. Publishers have changed the whole thing around, always. So you can hear the stories that go into writing a journal article or a book or whatever, you see. I brought Jim Nagaya in, who took over 700 MOOCs in Nigeria. He's a good friend of mine. He got certificates from over 500 of them. He now lives in Canada, in Edmonton, and his wife took over 100 as well. They're now Canadians. I'm going to try and bring them in to, I have a show on Saturdays called silverliningforlearning.org that is webcast at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. You can take a look at silverliningforlearning.org. If you get a chance, come to our show. This week, we have forestry people from UBC as guests from the University of British Columbia, talking about forest sustainability. We had penguin researchers a couple weeks ago. Again, silverliningforlearning.org, 5:30, usually 5:30 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday. Relevance or meaningfulness, having students build videos or demonstrations or how-tos. In this case, professional development videos for other people, for maybe you're working part-time or full-time for someone else. So having students create something that might be relevant to their work setting, okay? That's motivating, that's more engaging, that's something they can get credit for, actually. Meaningful relevance is case-based learning, scenario learning, having students learn from cases like my friend Mark Braun did in his anatomy courses, in his other courses in the medical school, physiology courses and so forth, a man with a heart pain, or a woman with a lump in her breast, or a person with abdominal pain, where he puts some slides in that the students observe, as well as tell their blood pressure, temperature, and heart rate, and all sorts of data, and the students work together to solve the problem, what they might have. You may not solve it, but to analyze it and come up with a possible solution. Case-based learning, these are free. If you are in the medical field, you type in Mark Braun, you can get his pathology cases, his clinical slides. I also can have students create Wikipedia pages or edit them. And I have my students write wiki books. We write books together, making learning really relevant. But our faculty in our School of Public and Environmental Affairs, they have students edit Wikipedia pages to have them become more experts within a field or discipline. The same with the School of Pharmacy at UC San Francisco. It's a way to engage people in learning. As I said, Merve shows me these cool tools like Trello, which lets teams organize and structure their work and lets the instructor monitor the progress of teams. And so they can go to the Trello, sets of Trello cards and see where the team is at. And if you click on a card, there are resources and links underneath each card. So the cards are a way of storing and organizing teamwork. And schools can use this in K-12 settings for activities and newsletters for parents, but they can be used in higher ed setting for small teamwork as well. And again, you can look at some of the examples that they have in the Trello website, like this one on a student group project or class newsletter. Another tool that I use, or tools that I've used back and forth, you might all have used Google Documents. It's a nifty tool, and I studied these kinds of tools back in 1990. They existed, many of them, Conference Writer, Collaborative Writer, Aspects, and Timbuktu, and all sorts of things. Today we have Google Docs and Mixed Ink and Now Comment and Meeting Words, where everyone's contributions might be a different color. And in Now Comment, you might have a paper and then the comments get pushed out to the right-hand side of the paper and the columns to the side. And everyone's comments are a different column. So it's a way to make it more interactive and enable more feedback for students. Another thing that I like to, by the way, we're moving beyond relevance and meaningfulness to interactive and collaborative learning. So interactive and collaborative learning, I like to bring in guests and tell the guests, you don't have to prepare anything. We'll prepare your talk for you. I'll have my students read their research and put together a set of slides with their figures and graphs and charts. And then the guest just has to talk about the graph or chart that the student selected, or pass if they don't want to talk about it. And they have to put in quotes from that person in the chat window, quotes that they like, so that the person we bring in can read what the students appreciated in their research. It's a way to get students to dig into one's research and point out guest speaker quotes or guest speaker visuals. This is a top 10. The guest doesn't have to prepare nothing. They just have to come in the time, and they get really excited to have someone read the research. And the students get to find out something about the research that they didn't read in the article or in the book. Nucleino is a tool that Mena and I used, her Wayne State students and I, and my students used to debate articles last year. And we had point counterpoint chapters in a book where the book was set up to be a first author article with a debate article, and then a response to the person who critiqued the article. And my students and Mena students took on roles of the people they read about using Nucleino. Nucleino is free. It's a wiki-like tool. So that's good and bad, because as you all know, with a wiki-like tool, you can erase something and it's lost. So Nucleino is, it's free up to a certain point, and it works. And you don't have to have passwords. Like if her students wanted to collaborate with Indiana and use our system, I'd have to get them passwords and all this silly stuff. So it's a way to override the system. It's a way to work outside Canvas or Blackboard or all the silly tools that our universities thrust upon us, the LMSs of the world, right? But you can lose work. So just a caution. It's a caution, but try it out in beta. It's a beta tool. It's kind of cool. Some of you might go to a website created at Drexel University. My friend Susan Aldridge, who's the president of Drexel Online Programs, she created a website called Virtually Inspired. And at Virtually Inspired, she's indexed all sorts of cool engineering and medical labs and interactivities. So, if you teach physics or algebra, or geometry, or engineering, or whatever, or some in the medical field, all sorts of simulations, animations, and interactivities are indexed at virtuallyinspired.org, all free. Why not check these out? Think about utilizing them. They're high. She only put the high quality things that they found, whether it's security software that you're teaching as a class, or you're teaching something related to gene regulation virtual. I have no idea. I've never taught molecular biology and cellular biology, but I'm willing to learn. You also have different healthcare scenarios and simulations where you get a patient that you have to make a diagnosis of, and provide treatment for. All sorts of different simulations, scenarios that are available in the healthcare fields, in the computer science fields, and engineering fields. You get a patient chart that you have to analyze and read and so forth, and make a decision about. There's another website created at the University of Colorado called PHET. And at PHET, which I think was for physics educational technology, but I might be wrong. They have physics animations and simulations in motion, sound, waves, heat and thermodynamics, quantum mechanics, light and radiation, but they also have chemistry ones and biology ones and earth science ones and math ones. They're little micro worlds that one interacts and explores. They're not a lot of depth. They're just simple little things that you download and manipulate and learn some Newtonian physics, for instance. And it's free, sir, free. And recently we move into, as we move into this engagement area in the tech variety model, we want to think about interactive and engaging things with virtual reality, augmented reality, like a virtual choir or a virtual conductor. And you can go to the link here and watch this play out. The Chronicle of Higher Education had this a couple, when was that? 2 years ago, in the Chronicle of Higher Ed, as well as VR headsets and augmented reality headsets to understand the heart, a virtual heart that you might take apart and show components of in augmented reality. Last, maybe 3 months ago, I was reading an article about the British Museum, and they've apparently come out with a new interactive timeline website where you can look at exhibits and artifacts in a historical timeline that you proceed down. And as you hit a certain date and time, you can open different things up based that are in Asia or in Europe or in Oceania or in the Americas or in Africa. What a fascinating way to encapsulate world history in a visual timeline of sorts. This is something that I actually dreamed about creating a similar tool where you'd walk up and down the ladder. Back maybe when I was a high school student. And it's glad, here we are all these years later, and the British Library is doing something like that. Again, download the slides at trainingshare.com. You can have all these links for free and explore all these exhibits that are very cool. And if you've not been to the British Museum, I highly recommend it. It's a great place to get lost in and just hang, Another one that came out a month ago was in the New York Times. And the New York Times had an article showing plate tectonics. And you could see how the Earth land structures, tectonic shifts in the continents over the past thousands or millions or billions of years. And again, something that is educational and is impactful, but yet you can learn about this in short bits. It's, visualization or visualization tools enable one to learn rather rapidly and watch this billion-year journey of the Earth's tectonic plates. What a cool thing is that? You can also do demonstrations to engage your students. Here the instructor is got a cell phone tripod and is holding up a phone, showing a beaker of sodium, if you will. And a thermometer sensor is placed in the screen so students may view their teacher performing a chemistry experiment. And then the students can respond by showing different things like rocks that they picked up in their local community and putting them up in Padlet or some other tool. So you make it interactive and make it engaging. So it's not just a demonstration, but students in turn are showing something that relates to the class of minerals that they found in their local community or in their backyard, in my case, because I have a creek and a slope and all sorts of cool stuff in the back. Number 9 is challenge, intention. And so getting students into challenging situations. So in my task 3 in my 511 class, just last week, students turned in a point counterpoint challenge where they had to debate different issues, pros and cons of different issues, whether social media is distracting or conductive, for instance, and maybe having people, in interactive animation scenes, if you will, the pros and cons of using PDF files, the pros and cons of Zoom. Here I had a student who had, talking about a particular topic, I think it was virtual worlds, he had himself, he was talking to himself, one with a lot of light on, one without so much light on. It was kind of interesting anyhow. Direct instruction versus constructivism debates. You can also have your students utilize a tool called SMILE, Stanford Mobile Inquiry Learning Environment, where the students have to ask questions at different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And the SMILE program will analyze the level of questions. SMILE was developed at Stanford by my friend Paul Kim. And he's now got a new tool called SMILE Up, which is AI-based and lets the SMILE tool develop right questions at 5 different levels of complexity. So you can give the SMILE system a topic and it'll generate questions. It will also evaluate questions. It's a very cool tool. You can also have students involved in role play or taking on personas of different people in a work setting, for instance, in different challenges where they have to take views of somebody else. And so you're creating controversial challenges that they're engaged. The University of Michigan does this in their Leadership Crisis Challenge competition. And they do viewpoint role playing where they have to take on views of different members of their team, if you will. Number 10 gets us to the final one of the tech variety, and that's yielding a product. Whether the student is creating a database of using Pinterest. Pinterest has taken off, by the way, in the past 6 months. Millions and millions of people around the world are using Pinterest. Mena created a lovely Pinterest summary in my class a few years back. Mind mapping tools to summarize their learning. My students take the discussion forums in Canvas or Blackboard and they create a mind map of the discussion as a final activity. Or you might create a timeline using X Timeline or Timeline Curator of all the content in your class. With links hot links, as you see there, the students have created a timeline of the field of educational technology from 1990 to 2020 or so. And they've tried to summarize my 30 years of teaching the class on this interactive timeline. All my syllabi, in effect, were on this timeline. Some students like a tool called Canva. I know Merve loves this tool called Canva. It is free, I think New Zealand or Australia, maybe she's Australian, the person who built it. But you can create flyers and infographics and brochures that are professional looking in Canva, timelines and so forth. So many of my students do that. As you can see how professional that they look. As I said, some of my students create final projects as a book or as a Wikibook chapter. And they put them up on the web and they keep expanding to the Wikibook that was developed back in 2007. It still exists and we have more and more students adding to 2 books that I developed in 2007 on learning theories and on emerging technology. You can take a look, they still are up there. And your students can get empowered by being owners of their own learning, or I should say authors of their own learning. When students are authors of their learning, you're hard pressed to keep the schools closed. In a high school setting, they'll want to come to schools on the weekend. In a university setting, they'll want to improve and refine their chapter over and over and over before they make it public to the world. Some students like doing Prezi presentations as their final project. These are 2 of my students, Gina and David, last week. They presented this evolution of remote teaching to my class. So that's the tech variety model. And I think we have a poll, Sarah.
Okay, I'm going to pull it up for you. Poll number 7.
I don't see it, so I'm going to stop sharing so I can see it.
There we go.
Oh, now I see it, okay. And so y'all, okay, 59, 60. And I see we're getting near the end of time, so I'll hit the highlights on model number 2 here. Okay, so interesting, 74%. We have 110 people here. I'll end the polling. I'll share the results, and engagement is the all-time winner here. Wow, okay. Engagement, then interactivity, and encouragement and feedback. Students want encouragement and feedback on everything they do. Tone and climate, you have to set the right climate. The case can be made that every single one of these is the most important, but notice no one picked autonomy. Okay, so let's go back to slides, and again, I'll just hit some highlights I hit the share screen. I got to remember to do that. Share my screen. So the other model, which goes to the second book here, is read, reflect, display, and do. In this book, we have 25 activities in the reading part, 25 reflection, 25 for displaying, 25 for doing. We go in a problem-solving wheel. Some people look at it as a learning style model. I'm trained as an educational psychologist. Educational psychologists don't believe in learning styles because they don't have validity and reliability. However, learning styles do help you become a better teacher because they force you to reflect on the components of your teaching to address the diversity of the learners out there. If you read the book, you'll see we talk about diversity a lot. This is a big word in Indiana right now, addressing diversity. We talk about learner diversity. And some people like hands-on things. You could start with hands-on doing and move backwards in time to reflection and reading. You don't have to go in this order. This is just one way to divide the pie up of all the things that you can be doing. And so you might have.
We have engaged the Borg.
Lightsabers that you can use in your classes. I have mine. I have my smaller ones that my students give me. Read, reflect, display, and do. Dr. Ka Jong at Wayne, who works with Mena at Wayne State, her and I developed this model. I once presented to her class and she said, "You have the R2D2 model." I said, "No, I don't. I don't have an R2D2 model." She says, "No, in your syllabi, you say read, reflect, display, and do. Every one of your syllabi." She says, "Let's write an article on it. Let's write a book on it." And so that's, it wasn't planned. I didn't know I had the R2D2 model, so she pointed it out. Auditory, verbal words, the reading rainbow from Geordie LaForge there out of Star Trek, who, when I stood next to him at the South by Southwest conference about 5 or 10 years ago, he didn't have his visor on, so I didn't recognize him. But yeah, that's him. So
Computer, this is Captain Picard.
So podcasts, listening to a podcast show, or reading a blog, or getting a Twitter feed. These are all words that you can utilize within your class. Having students do a blog, having students do a podcast, or listen to a podcast, or have their own Twitter feed, or have a class Twitter feed. These are all words, verbal.
I don't trust you,
Second
Q.
is observing, watching, viewing, and then making judgments, reflecting on what you view. Whether it's a infographic that your students might view, or a graphic of some kind, or it's having students reflect on their papers using Google Documents, having 2 columns, having them do reflection activities, or Video Ant, reflecting on videos, or Perusal, which is a free tool. One of our professors is using at Indiana to have students analyze articles. Perusal is a tool for collaboration and annotation on articles that's free. And Merve talked highly of it, so I put it in here. And maybe during the Q&A in a few minutes, you can ask Merve about Perusal and why she recommends Perusal and how she utilizes it.
Program complete. Enter when ready.
Displaying through a timeline, through a flow chart, through a picture, whether it's using Wordle. Well, Wordle doesn't exist anymore, but WordSift, Word It Out, Taggle, to have a visual of the words that you're using. So you see it, visualize. It's dual coding theory, verbal and visual. It's more powerful and impactful when you see a word cloud, because you have a way that represents how often you use the words are bigger. Those words are used more often than the other words. So it's a way to visualize content, discourse, maybe in a discussion thread, You're doing a content analysis, but visualizing it in some ways. Another idea for part 3 displaying is having educational videos that anchor our instruction. Watching a BBC video or CNN video, a short video clip on interest rates or on housing when you teach an economics class, and then have all sorts of activities based on that CNN video or the BBC video or TED Talk or TED Ed. Short anchored experiences or macro context you can come back to as the instructor. You can situate the learning in that short video clip because video is empowering. Whether you're watching my short videos on blended learning that I did a decade ago, I've just repurposed them and put them up on the web to train instructors in doing blended learning back when I had much shorter hair and was much younger. World Mapper tool is a tool that lets you look at databases of content in a world map. So if we look at the world map on the left-hand side, that was COVID a year ago. And then we got world map on the left, that's COVID 6 months ago. So you can see where COVID's exploding around the world based on a world map. This could be pancreatic cancer deaths, or it could be school spending. Seeing a world map in terms of all sorts of data is empowering for learning. Seeing an animation sequence or a chart or a graph over time. These visualization kind of tools are empowering for learners. Or a short animated video explaining hand safety and hand sanitization during COVID times, during COVID-19 times. These little animation sequences are, again, impactful and powerful for learning. There are storehouses of these videos today because we're in the Wikipedia age. If you're in the medical training field, you can go to websites like MedTube that have 20,000 odd records and 200,000 users. Another way to visualize is to create a mind map or a concept map or a timeline using spicy nodes. Wherever you click on a node, you get another node. It's kind of a spicy, nicey tool. Or CMap or bubble.us. These are all free tools for concept mapping and mind mapping.
Make it so, make it so.
Or having a little video teaser. So Maine and I were doing a session on writing and helping young people learn how to write and publish. We had a short little teaser to encourage people to show up for the session.
Make it so.
Which Merve created for me, for us. Number 4 is tactile learners, games and simulations and dance and role.
All stations, prepare for reconnection.
And so my students might get involved in case-based analysis. Some of my students were once in a case-based forum with students around the world solving each other's case problems. We had students from Finland and the UK and Peru and Korea and the US looking at problems in schools in Finland, the UK, and all over. And we had to solve each other's problems in case analyses. Having students put their final work up in a gallery or a dossier of their best work is a way to engage them because they know the best of the best is going to go up in Dr. Bonk's gallery or in the dossier, and they want their work up there for the next semester to see. So they keep improving and refining it. These demonstration videos that they might create. And you wouldn't believe the amount of work that the students put in, well, you probably do believe their final projects. This is one of my students from a week ago. She did one on mobile learning and K-12 education. It was just, if you click on the link later, just knock your socks off. It was so amazing what she did for her final project. Or one of my students actually designed his own MOOC, his own massive open online class, because he used to work at Qualtrics. He said, why don't I create one on Qualtrics using a website called Udemy? So we go to some final questions. Sarah, before we go to the final questions, I'll just point out, you might go to, if you want to learn more about the future of higher ed, you might read 2 books, Academia Next by my friend Brian Alexander, or Learning Innovation by my friend Joshua Kim, both from Johns Hopkins Press, both talking about the future of higher education. We'll get to those polling questions here in a second. Now the world is open for you to learn in all sorts of new ways. People around the world greet me in Bangkok or in Taiwan or in Singapore or in Indiana. They all greet me like this. So, I want you all to hold your hands up in the air And the count of three, no, I can't take your picture, unfortunately, but I can get everybody to jump. So we're at a jumping off point, Sarah. If I could get everyone to stand with me. All the women could jump on the count of three with me. 1, 2, 3, jump. All the men, 1, 2, 3, jump. And everyone together, 1, 2, 3, jump. And don't ask me why I had you do that. We are at a jumping off point to trying something new in these COVID times. And so this is my talk. Go to trainingshare.com for my slides, publicationshare.com for my publications, kurtbonk.com for other things.
Let's see what's out there. Engage.
You'll have 1 or 2 ideas from this talk. Hopefully, a couple of you will write to me and tell me what you're using. So I'll use it in my next book and I'll talk about them. Hopefully, a couple of you become my friends. You'll become someone I correspond with in the future, and you'll say you attended this session, or you'll tap me on the shoulder at a conference down the road in Toronto or in Vancouver or wherever we are in the world. You'll say you went to this particular session, and here's an idea that you tried out as a result. I welcome you to share with Merve, with Mena, or with myself, any of the ideas that you're using. We'll go to the chat window after the final polls, and I'll take your Q&A, any questions that you might have. So I'll stop my sharing now and just say a big thank you to let me in here a second time. And Sarah, final polls, you want to go through these and we'll see who's going to stick around for them. Okay, here's the first one. How many ideas did you get from this talk? So far, so good. And we still have 94 people here. And now I can see the chat window in case people want to write anything in the chat window while the polls are going on. I can finally read the chats. So, okay, we'll share the results. As you see, at least 2. Thank you for the person or people who had said 2. And a couple of people got 3, 4, 5 is the goal. If you got 2, write to me. I'll try and get you 1 more. More than 10, about 20%. So good. Let's go to the next poll. And maybe I can call them up now, Sarah, I guess. Yes, which pedagogical framework do you prefer? Tech Variety or the R2D2? Which one? And I only went through R2D2 in 10 minutes or so. It was the first one that I designed. The Tech Variety actually took almost 15 years to write the book. I had talked about it back in the early 2000s. It took a while to get to. 17 people, 26%. Let's end the polling here. Share the results. 17 people, 26% are going to try and create some unique combination of the two. There you go. Let's stop the sharing here and we'll go to the next question, Sarah. Do you want me to call them up or you want to call them? There, she's got it. Okay. Are you excited to try anything out that you've heard today? Yes, many of them. Yes, 1. Yes, several of them. Not yet, but hopefully soon. Nope, my brain is dead. It's simply not working. Nope, I have an internet connection issues. Okay. 53, we've got 60 people, 61, 62, 63, 64. Okay, I'm going to end the polling here. We'll share the results. Several of them, okay. Not yet, but hopefully soon, 4 of you. Good. The 4 of you, you know, if who did say that, I encourage you to reach out and tell me what you're teaching, and we'll see if we can, if I don't think of something, maybe Merve or Mena does. So next one, Sarah. Does all this stuff that you've heard give you a headache? Yes, but I'm still excited to try things out. Yes, I need some medicine, a break. Not sure. No, let's go all day. Okay, 3 of you. No, it was just right. No, let's go another hour. Quite a varied answers to this question. Okay. We've got up to 56 out of 81 of you, 57, 58, 59. Let's get to 60. Okay, let's end the polling here and share the results. Quite varied here, but most people are excited or think it was just right. Okay, good. So Sarah, can we do another one? Do we have any?
That was the last one.
Oh, that was the last one. Okay. Now I'm back with you all. Now we can take questions, right, Sarah?
We can. Merve has been awesome behind the scenes and taking care of most of them. I do have one queued up. It's from Karen. She said, teaching international students virtually presents challenges in their participation, especially from Asian cultures based on their cultural learning experiences. What are the most effective tools you suggest?
Well, again, I'll give you some ideas, but I don't know whether they're the most effective tools because we're always experimenting. We're always trying something a little bit different. And I will say that I'm fortunate that the majority of my students actually come from Asian cultures. And I spend a lot of time in Taiwan, Korea, sometime in China, Singapore, and Malaysia. And so I think that one technique I'm using this semester is instead of having everyone in a discussion forum, I'm having people blog each week, in a personal blog. But I've decided instead of using critical friend activities, which you have one person giving you feedback, I'm having teams of 4 or 5, and those teams are giving each other feedback on their weekly reflections. And so they get some feedback beyond the instructor, beyond the one critical friend, but they're not opening up their ideas to the entire class. So that team becomes a safe harbor for those international students to discuss more and reflect more. A blog enables someone to not post until they're ready to post. And so giving people the flexibility, and I think I have a 48-hour grace period, not a 24-hour. I've decided 48 hours is a good grace period for most things, also to help those students who might be more timid or introverted or so forth, to give them a little more time to reflect, or some safe distance in terms of posting things. I think that having people sign up for activities or presentations is a way to let them have ownership or choice over what they're going to do in the class. So last year at this time, I had a class that flipped over from a face-to-face to an online. But before we went to online, every week I had students present an article in the form of a poster, a paper, a presentation. We had all sorts of different things that they were doing. But I let them decide the format of what they're going to present. And a lot of them picked the poster idea. A lot of my we had more than half of the students were international, from Asia in particular. And a lot of them picked the poster session, which was more interactive, more one-to-one, rather than the more formal presentation in front of the entire class, because there were more small group presentations and people rotate between the poster sessions and what they're showing. So if you're doing in a Zoom, you do a small group presentations on the paper rather than the whole class presentations. They're still doing a presentation and still getting experience. And one thing that I'm finding with poster presentations is you rotate them. And so they get a chance to present more than once. And so students might rotate around. 5 of them might go to a poster, and then 5 of them might go to another poster. And we have all these posters right on the walls of the room. Now you can do this again in a virtual space that way. That's a possibility too. So Karen, I think it was, write to me and I'll give you some other ideas and some things I've written on the topic. Sarah, do we have anything else?
Great. No, that was the last one. And I think I don't see anything in the chat. So we'll just wrap up the session. So a big thank you to you, Dr. Bonk, for sharing your insights and expertise on how to motivate and engage online learners with your tech variety. And thank you, Merve, for answering the questions behind the scenes. This was a most fascinating session, and I know I got a lot of great takeaways, and I hope everyone in our audience did as well.
Sarah, I just want to point out, Merve had, Maina had to leave early, so I want to thank Maina too. She had another meeting to go to. And if anyone wants to put 3 words in the chat window of what they've learned from today's session as a final reflection, this is one thing that I like to do, Karen. Have people put 3 words in, or 4 words or 5 words in the chat window. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone for joining us today and staying overtime to continue the session and hear the questions and hear what you had to say. I just wanted to mention that I will post the recording to this session once it has processed on www.teachonline.ca under the webinar series tab, and I'll put that link in the chat momentarily. I've been putting it through the session as well. And you'll also get a reminder in about 24 hours. The system sends out the link in about 24 hours after the session as well. And on our webinar webpage, you will also find a lineup of webinars coming up in March and April. So keep checking those. We're continually adding new sessions there. So thank you again, Curtis. Thank you again, Merve and Maina, even though she's not here. And have a great day. I'll just leave the session open for a couple more minutes. Everyone can put their reflections on, and then we'll close it down. So thank you again.
Thank you, Sarah, for inviting me back. And I see the engagement word is popping up over and over again. Challenge and engagement. That's, support and engagement. That is effective teaching. So my email, maybe, I think it was in there somewhere, but I'll throw it in here at the end in case people watch the recording later on. There it goes. Okay, thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you down the road.
Great, thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.